Hi, and welcome to part 14 of Let's Build a Chatbot in C# using Microsoft Agent Framework. This is part 14 about more settings, refactorings, and real storage, because we're slowly getting to the first natural end of this, where we have built it all in Blazor Server. And we want to, at some point, be able to deploy this as well. But before we do that, I wanted to go in and do some more settings, some more refactorings, and turn into real storage using Cosmos DB and some blob storage. Because right before we were running, we had our LLM and secrets in app host parameters. That was just user secrets. But the attachment we put into app data, and the generated images we put into www root. And the conversation settings were just put in either local storage or in temp folders on the machine. So it could run on a local Windows machine, but it couldn't really run up in the cloud had we made a publish of it, because those temp folders were ephemeral, and we wouldn't be able to ensure that things were being saved. The same goes for app data and www root. So in what we were going to cover today is that we have taken the LLM secrets, them we have retained here because we want them to just be in user secrets. When we deploy, we might go with a key vault or not, depending on what we need. Attachments and generated images are now up in Azure Blob Storage, and conversations and settings are now stored in Cosmos DB. So another thing is the refactoring part. I will go into these things a bit more in details in 1 second, but another thing was that when we build a Blazor server, what typically happens is that when we are in an Aspire, we have a small app host that takes care of parameters. We have Surface Default that takes care of a few dependency injections, in our case, the dependency injection against Agent Framework Toolkit. And then we end up with a Blazor server that have a bunch of visuals and logic up here for various different systems. And I wanted to change that so that the Blazor server were more or less only visuals. And we put in a lot of the data that was up here and pulled them down into the Surface Default. So a lot of the logic and keeping the dependency injections down here. And the reason I'm doing this is for the next iteration of Let's Build a Chatbot, where we actually want to build other front ends and other back ends. And if we are to leverage what we have done so far and not just reinvent the wheel or copy paste, we need to have them in a system where it's independent on what the front end and the back end is. So I pulled a lot of things down into server defaults. We will see that in 1 second. So we at some point can build an ASP.NET Core backend and a front end in other tools, probably in React. So we have just prepared a lot of things in here. This means that we needed to have some online resources for the first part, that we didn't just want them in folders. So I've made a Cosmos DB account, just a free tier, so you can do this more or less for free. There's a storage account, and of course pay for storage, but that's pennies, so it shouldn't be too much. The Cosmos DB will be auto set up if you just provide a connection string, but it ends up with a database called Chatbot and 2 containers, one for conversations and one for settings. So you can see here, if I have 4 different conversations, there will be 4 different things here, and each of them are linked to a user, so each user gets their own. And that's just the message we had in a JSON file before. Now it's just up in Cosmos. The settings, the same way. We just store one record per user, so we can have the information from that user. Finally, we made a storage account, and in that there's two blob storages, an attachment and a generated images. So here the images and PDF we end up adding to attachment, and the images we make for generation will be stored up here. So we are completely independent of the machine things are running on. And again, when we build multiple backends and fronts, we can actually use the same data, same conversations, same attachments, same generated images. Visual-wise, if you were to go into the repo and run the code, it will not look anything different. Things have just been moved around, but the visuals itself is not any different, and these images are then hosted up in blob storage. These conversations are saved in Cosmos DB. The settings are saved in Cosmos DB. The only real change that's visual is that there's a few more of these settings, so you can choose if you want to show reasoning, want to show tokens, want to show tool calls, and want to show the memory updates. The final thing I put in is a new danger zone. So because now if someone were to use this, they can't really just go to their temp folder and delete what was previously set and memories and so on. So now there is a small setting that you can get rid of all your conversations and settings, and that will of course delete them up in the cloud. App host wise, we had 3 parameters, the Azure endpoint and key, and then the weather service. Now we have extended that, of course, in order to get a blob storage connection string and a Cosmos DB connection string. And then comes the big changes in the refactoring of the code, which have taken quite a while to get right. But we saw in the past that the Blazor server had a lot of different things. It had AI context providers. It had the layout and pages, of course. It had some extensions that were more or less Entra-ID specific and agent framework specific. It had a bunch of models, services, and tools. And inside the program, all of these needed to be wired up, and all logic were up in the Blazor server. Now you can see we only really have layout and pages left, and a few new models to keep track of the visual state of things. So what have the user input and what are their attachments in memory right now before we save them up into the cloud. And I made a new visual state that keeps track of all the things of currently streaming and so on and so forth. There's only one local storage key left, which is dark mode, and program is more or less empty. It's just visuals now. And all this code have now gone into the service defaults of the solution, where we only had the small extension where we did a little bit about dependency injection of Agent Framework Toolkit and the weather service. And we had some keys for that, some constants. Now we have the context providers that we had over here. They have been moved over, so it can be used in multiple backends. Constants for the AI models have just been drawn out of all the code over here, so it's easier to get to. The Cosmos ID, names of things, and the secret keys we had in the past here. All the extensions have more or less just been moved over from here over here. All the models have been moved over and cleaned up a bit. So we got one big settings instead of various different things that were in various different places of settings. And then we have put all the services over here. So the agent service, in order to generate, for example, the title of a conversation, is saved over here because we probably need to make a conversation title in other places as well. The blob storage service is just normal blob storage from Azure, nothing fancy there. conversational chat message mapper is the one we had over here before, but there was nothing Blazor specific in it, so we moved it. Conversation service has been rewired, of course, instead of having files and folders to be the Cosmos DB. Image generation service has been moved out of image generation tool here, so it can independently be used as a service and a tool. They could be linked together, but if we need to do something special with image generation, it's its own service now, and setting services, of course, as well. So the extension just got a bit more dependency injections, but beyond that, everything should more or less now be ready to have a deployment, which we will cover in a separate video. I might add a few more features before we do that, but else this is kind of the first season of Let's Build a Chatbot coming to an end very soon. And also because of summer, I will take a little break before we see season 2 of this. So there might only be 1 or 2 videos left here until we wait a bit, and the next videos will be in August. But so far, so good. If you want to see any of the details, of course, just go to the repo, RWJ Chatbot, and there you can go in and grab the code. And if you want to see previous sessions, they are in different branches. So it's not like you can't go back to some of the previous version if you don't like being dependent on the cloud. You can still see the previous versions up there. So with that, thank you for this time, and see you on the next one.